Hey guys, welcome to another Transfer Listed, your favorite stop for Arsenal news and in-depth analysis on players being linked with the move to Arsenal. Today, we're going to be doing an in-depth analysis on how Kamavinga would fit into this Arsenal side. We'll talk about the player profile, statistics, how he compares to Arsenal fan favorite Bissouma, and a potential formation change. So we'll talk about all those things. And before we get into all the info, please remember to like the video and subscribe to the channel. There's plenty of really good content coming your way. At 10 p.m. UK time, George and Harry will be joining me as we discuss Arsenal's big money summer and the two-pronged approach to squad building that will address Arsenal's present and future at the same time. So in the chat box, let me know how you guys are feeling. What did you think about the Netherlands performance today? It was amazing. I was watching Depay and Gini Wijnaldum play together, and I'm just thinking like, wow, if only, the wages or the money involved with the Barcelona deal for Wijnaldum would have been a little bit different, and those two would have been playing together, So let me know what you guys are saying in the chat box, and we'll just do some greetings really quick. So there's about 30 of you guys watching right now, so get in the chat box and let's just do a quick greeting. How are you guys feeling? Sean says, hey, Jess. Hey, Sean. Jonas asked a question. Okay. Do you think we could start with a 3 center back formation next season? I think we pretty much play with a 3 back anyway with Chambers, so there's a chance that we could, if Arteta wants to integrate Saliba without putting too much pressure on him, it might be nice to play in a back 3, but ultimately I think we play in a back 3 anyway when we play with Chambers, so maybe I wouldn't be, against it at all. Abdullah says, my thoughts on Timber. I think he's a good player. I've never really seen him play before the Euros. I think he's really good. And just like most of the Netherlands players, very technically secure, good with the ball at his feet, so I think he's a good player. Usab says, hello, beautiful Jess. Thank you. And everybody in the chat. Van Auger says, Frankie de Jong honestly has the potential to be the best midfielder and player in the world, one of the most complete players I've ever seen. Renee Black says, got a chance to see some of the young Dutch guys. Rancid Pumpkin says, good evening. Jonas says, Depay has an attitude problem. Okay. J October says, Jess, you good? I'm great. Have nothing to complain about today. AK Gunner says, good evening. Good evening to you as well. So yeah, seems like you guys are doing well. So let's go ahead and get started. So let's see, what do we want to do first? So on to Camavinga. So let's just talk about kind of where this whole thing came from. Yesterday, we had kind of spoken about it already, but just to reiterate, we reported that Alexis Bernard from Le Temps Sport believed we could be working behind the scenes for the last 2 months to sign Camavinga. PSG are also interested, but they may not have the funds, and he's ready to leave, and he doesn't want to renew his deal with 1 year left. So Rennes has lost a lot of their negotiating power. Once you let the player get into the last year of their contract, you're really, cutting it close. And they will most likely have to sell for less than what they really want to, unless there's some sort of bidding war. So if somebody else felt like they could, bring something to the table more than Arsenal could, then that would drive the price up. But in terms of just being able to ask for whatever they want due to the contract that he's on at the moment, they wouldn't be able to ask for as much, as they probably would like to. And before we get started, it's always important for me to reiterate that this show is not really is he going to come to Arsenal? Arsenal's so crap at transfers. Why would he come to Arsenal show? It's definitely not that. We just do a more in-depth analysis on the player. And of course, we're going to compare him to Bissouma, who is somebody who we are linked with as well, that a lot of you guys like. So we'll talk about the differences between the two. But, just to touch on, would he come to Arsenal, with bigger clubs unable to pay and his desire to move on, I do think that he would come with assurances on playing time. He said in the past that his priority is his development and he wants to play. So I'm not sure if at a Real Madrid or a PSG, he would get that from them, but he would start right away at Arsenal. He walks straight into the first team. He would start, in our midfield. So if he's looking for the step before the main step, or the bigger step, this would be a good opportunity for him and us because, we kind of talked about this yesterday, but yes, it is a risk, to bring in somebody who's, 18 years old, relatively, he's proven in Ligue 1, but, not proven in the Premier League. But if you could get him for, if there's no COVID market, he's going for 100 million. If you could get him for 50, if he has a good couple of seasons at Arsenal when the market becomes a little bit healthier, we could sell him for double, so it's a good opportunity for him. And it seems like it would be a good opportunity for us if we were able to make sure that we have the right environment in place for him to be successful. So I think the club, if they're working behind the scenes, we must feel like we have a chance, especially if we're willing to put somebody like Bissouma on the back burner to explore this option. So I just want to go ahead and put that out there, before we get into, the profile part of everything. Let's see. Mohammed says, sorry if you've already addressed this, but thoughts on us selling some of our current center backs this summer. We can do that towards the end. So make sure you just, when we do the Q&A at the end of the show, just make sure you pop that back in there. Let's see. Papa says, but I came for the Edu Hate Fest. We're not doing that here, unfortunately. Dublin Gunner says that would have been a terrible title for the show. Yo-Yo says, I don't see how he would help Party unless he would start in lieu of him. Olivier says he does fit well with Arsenal. He just needs to hit the gym before the Premier League. So there's, differences of opinions. And Haji, basically what they said is PSG, not in terms of they don't have money at all, but they have other priorities. They're in a huge rebuild. And I'm sure bringing in an 18-year-old that, an 18-year-old at this point for PSG might not be the best step because they need to rebuild significantly. So I can understand why they'd be saying that if they're already looking to bring in Raphael Varane, that's 50 million right there. They're looking to bring in Hakimi, that's 60 million right there. They're looking into potentially bringing in Pogba, that's a lot. So if they're looking to rebuild that squad, bringing in an 18-year-old is not really on their list of priorities. So I think what they're saying is they don't have funds to bring in him as well, not they're broke, So yeah, let's go ahead and get to the actual profile. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen now. Okay. Make sure you guys can see that. Oh, where's my little decorations? Hold on, you guys. Looking jank. Here we go. Much better. It's not really that much better, but hey. So let's talk a little bit about Kamavinga just in general. So 18 years old, citizenship, he's from France, or his citizenship is France. So he has made appearances for the full national team, but right now his current international level is the under 21s. And he's listed as a central midfielder. in League One, he was in their starting 11 for Stade Rennes, for Rennes, 74% of the time, so that's a lot of minutes for a very young player. Had 1 goal and 2 assists, but we know that, he's more of a central midfielder slash DM. So, goals and assists aren't really his bag, but, if you care about those things, that's where he kind of lands in that respect. So as you guys have already said in the chat box, he is left-footed. So that's something to take into consideration. Again, we had already kind of spoke about his contract, which expires next summer on June 30th. So that is where the problem, is for Rennes at the moment. Current market value is 60 million. Again, if there's no bidding war and he's forcing a way out, they may have to accept less than that. And he's pretty much been at Rennes for forever, I wouldn't say forever, but, this would be his first, big contract, his first big move. He was in Rennes, academy, in 2018. So he's been there for a while. So very good player, very good young player. I mean, so many people talk about this kid, and I think he is good. I do think he's good from what I've seen. I think he's not your average 18-year-old, let's just say that, and his style of play, in my opinion, I would say that he's Conte-esque defensively with his ability to nip the ball off of players. And he also has a good sense of danger. So he knows where to be in order to, just kind of nip the ball away from players that, maybe going towards the central defenders and all that kind of stuff. So that's really good. We need players that can take the ball off of other players. And he loves to play long balls, but I would say his main zone of genius is his dribbling ability. He's a high-level dribbler and very press-resistant. His progressive carry stats are very good, which again, when we talk about consistencies between players we've been linked with, Bissouma, Kamavinga, James Madison, Ben White, they're all very good progressive dribblers. And so that's something to take note of. So, and like I said, he's pretty press resistant, which is, what we need. In our midfield, we need players that cannot be harassed off the ball. And if for some reason the passing lanes are blocked, we need to have players that can dribble through pressure and move defenders around and low blocks around. So he would be good, in that respect. So now let's move into here. Okay. So more stats. Stats. We love stats around here. So let me make sure I'm looking at the right screen. So this is kind of where I want to focus, my time when talking with his statistics. So the goals and assists, that's not really his game. Again, we're looking at somebody who is seen as a central midfielder slash defensive center midfielder. So we're not really looking at, his assists and all that kind of stuff. But where it starts to get really interesting is, his pass completion is quite high, which is good. We don't want somebody who's just kicking the ball around, Progressive carries in the 87th percentile. He, his progressive carries are about 6.43 per 90. That's really good. Dribbles completed 94% in the 94th percentile, 1.9 dribbles completed per game. So that's almost 2 dribbles completed each game. Touches in the attacking penalty box are not that much. I mean, we're comparing this to other midfielders, so you don't really expect your midfielders to be in the penalty box unless you're like a Ramsey or a Willock. But even in that, they're not really in the penalty box. But in the 64th percentile with 1.35 touches in the attacking penalty box. Now, where we get to progressive passes received. So these are passes that are not in the defensive part of the pitch. So we're not talking about in Rennes' half, we're talking about in their opposition half. So he receives about 3.3 passes in the attacking, the opposition's half per game in the 81st percentile. So what we're kind of seeing is a trend towards a player that doesn't really play in the defensive half. He's more progressive in where he is around the pitch. And when I show you guys his heat map, it will make a little bit more sense. Now, this is where it gets even more interesting. Pressures. He has about 22.55 pressures per 90. Pressures are the number of times applying pressure to the opposing player who is receiving, carrying, or releasing the ball. 22 per 90 in the 88th percentile. Tackles, 3.89, about 4 tackles per game in the 97th percentile. So we're talking about a player that you can immediately see in a high pressing system. Somebody who, I mean, that's very, very good in terms of pressing. And just to give you some perspective on how that shapes up against Yves Bissouma, his pressures are about 16 per game and in the 28th percentile. And he mostly sits at the base of the defense, so what we can kind of see from Camavinga is he likes to get up the pitch and press the opposition. And that's something that, as an Arsenal fan, I think we can kind of say that maybe we're lacking. And even Bissouma, his, progressive passes received is very low. So we're looking at two different players. We're looking at somebody who's maybe more of a free 8 versus a 6 in Bissouma, if we're going into, thinking about how they compare against each other. So let's see what you guys are saying so far. Ivy says, I like Kamavinga, but I don't think Arsenal will get him. George said he's a box-to-box midfielder. Exactly. George's opinion. I'm excited about the Aaron Sanchez kid. We need to keep tapping into the South American market. Sean says his physicality and mobility is his greatest assets. Everything else will develop in time. Rancid says, I prefer Bissouma. We need a Premier League proven player. Get him for depth, but not as a starter. You can't get Kamavinga as depth. You will get Kamavinga as a starter. There's no reason for him to come to Arsenal if he's not going to be guaranteed playing time. So this is somebody that I think comes straight into Arsenal's, starting lineup. I would be very shocked if we brought him in to play as an understudy to anybody, especially when we brought in Lokonga. And for me, Lokonga is Thomas Partey's, understudy per se. This is a starter in our midfield, to be honest. So those are the statistics. And of course, we'll do comparison like side by side with Bissouma. But I want to show you guys his kind of like his heat map. So let's go here. No. Here. Okay. I know it looks weird real quick, you guys. Just give me 1 second. Okay, so this is his heat map. So what you can see is he's literally everywhere. And I think something that we need to take into consideration, when we're looking for players now for Arsenal, I'm hoping that this is what they're looking for, is players that are not limited by the side and they don't have to play on a certain side of the pitch. They can move around. And when you have players that are not stuck in a certain position and they can move to the left and to the right, regardless of what foot they use, left, right, he's pretty much box to box. So you can see his heat maps are absolutely everywhere. And that's something that we don't really have in our players. Like, Granit Xhaka was really just on this left-hand side here. Dani Ceballos was pretty one-sided, but Camavinga seems like the type of player that can play pretty much anywhere and makes you a completely different question, to answer for the opposition. What I saw from, from the games that I've seen him play and his compilations, a lot of what he's really good at is pressing high and nipping the ball from players in these areas here. So us being able to move up towards the halfway line and to have players like Thomas Partey and Kamavinga nipping the ball off of the opposition players, we're talking about another way of creating chances. We can have a creative midfielder in there kind of stroking the ball around and dictating play. But when you're also able to press the opposition into making mistakes, and the next step is being inside of their box, which his passes into the opposition box is also very good. That's very significant for a team that tends not to press because we don't have mobile players. And if they get beat and they get ran past, we're usually under a lot of pressure. So having another player that can move about the pitch and can, press the opposition like Thomas as well, I think that bodes really well. And, Bissouma is also good at pressing, but his pressing numbers tend to be in more Brighton's half than the opposition half, which is the exact opposite of Camavinga. He tends to be in the opposition's half pressing, and that makes him completely different to Bissouma in every single way. So let's also talk about where in terms of formation. So I know this is kind of small, but I'll just kind of talk about it. So I was able to pull a couple of different formations that he's played in for Rennes in the last couple of years. And so he's played in a 4-4-2. Camavinga's right here. So he's actually on the left-hand side of a pivot with Nzonzi. Then you see here in a 4-3-3, he's on the right-hand side. So he'd be an inverted, right-sided midfielder in a 3 right here, which is interesting. And then he also played in a 4-4-2 on the other side, so, and then he was, and then in a 4-1-4-1 where he was on the left-hand side of this 3 in midfield. So, I mean, he's pretty flexible. He's malleable. He can play in different, formations, which is really important because I don't think Arteta is going to settle on a system, if I'm honest. And I think if you have a player like this, you don't have to settle on a system. When you have a player like Kamavinga, like Bissouma, you have to settle more on a system because right now, the way that he plays, even though I think he can do more, if we're just going by what he does at Brighton, he's really a traditional kind of 6. So we're looking at a double pivot, which isn't like a double pivot with Granit Xhaka where you have one player that really needs hand-holding. But still, if we wanted to move to a midfield 3, I think I'd be able to move to a midfield 3 rather seamlessly and still be able to use a pivot, but have some flexibility in what we want to do. I think he's the perfect player to do that, or a player similar to him. I think Lokonga kind of has that about him as well, that ability to do more than one thing. We need players that are not going to pigeonhole us or limit our ceiling, So let me see what you guys are saying before we do a full comparison. Yo-Yo says he's versatile, getting excited. Now, Ify says, to be honest, Kamavinga gets us a better option than Bissouma does. Make sure you guys are liking the video. There's about 60 of you guys watching right now, so make sure you guys like the video and subscribe to the channel. Olivier said in Rennes, he played with Nzonzi behind him. GK says, of course, you can't press with a midfielder like Xhaka. Let's see. Yo-Yo says his signing would suggest Arteta wants to play a midfield 3, not a pivot. I agree. Lone Star Londoner says EPL is very different than the French league. So yeah, we can talk about those things as well. Like, the differences, and will he struggle in the Premier League? Adaptation is a big deal, but he does give you a lot of flexibility. And if you also have Lokonga, then you have some really good midfield options, in there. So now let's move to the full just comparison of the two. I know there's like a lot of numbers here and stuff, but just bear with me for a second. So this is kind of where what I kind of wanted to talk about mostly here is Camavinga's defensive, touches in the defensive penalty area are significantly less than Bissouma. So, Bissouma is the type of player that's going to get the ball off of the defenders or off of the goalkeeper and build up. Kamavinga is not that person. So that leads me to believe that would continue to be Thomas, so keep that in mind. And then as we move forward here, you can see that it becomes a little bit more equal in the defensive third, mid third, attacking third. But when we get into the attacking penalty box, you can see that Camavinga tends to be there a little bit more than Bissouma, which would suggest, kind of be in alignment with his box-to-box nature. And then the carries are pretty much the same. They both have very good dribbling numbers. I just think in the areas of the pitch in which they operate are completely different. Bissouma's more, back by the defenders. Camavinga's more box-to-box, as I've kind of already said. Defensive actions, the pressures, this also, tells a story too. Most of Bissouma's defensive pressures pressures are in the defensive third, whereas Camavinga's, pressures are more in the attacking third. You would see that his attacking third pressures are 120, where Bissouma's are 55. So again, you're getting a pressing more up the pitch. So I kind of really like that, to be honest, you guys. I think we need to be a little bit more aggressive in pressing in our attack. And so he would really help us with that, even though you guys know I love Bissouma. I think he adds something special too. So they're pretty comparable when we talk about passing numbers. I mean, pass completion is pretty much spot on, at Kamavinga 89.3%, Bissouma 87.2%. So there's not a lot between them in terms of their press resistance, their passing stats, their ability to keep the ball, but they're just in different parts of the pitch, so that's the key, with that. So yeah, basically, with Bissouma, you're getting more of a 6. With Camavinga, you're getting more of a free 8 with elite defensive capabilities or potential. Very similar in possession, press resistance, passing. Bissouma is press resistant, or not press resistant. I'm sorry, I keep saying that. Premier League proven. There's a lot of P's there. Possession, press resistance, passing, Premier League proven. That's a lot of P's. But Premier League proven with good upside. We know that even though Bissouma is a little bit, quite a bit older because he's 24 years old, still, if, he has a couple of good years with us, 26, 27 years old, if we wanted to sell him, we could, and we'd probably make more on him. We'd have to pay 30 to 40 million, but that's fine, for a player of his quality. Bissouma is a very quality player. Then we get into Kamavinga, more of a top talent with a lot of potential, tremendous upside. If you can get him for about 50 million, something around there, you can probably double that if he does really well, because he will be very much so hyped. You have to take that into consideration. And if I just had to use one word to describe both of them, I would say Bissouma as a protector and Kamavinga as an instigator. Kamavinga is more malleable, so take that how you want to. So let's see what you guys are saying now. You guys would seem like a little bit more excited after you saw the heat map and stuff like that. It didn't seem like you guys were as excited until I showed you guys the heat map. George's opinion says Camavinga as a backup at Arsenal is ridiculous. It won't happen, you guys. If he's not starting, he won't come. GK says Camavinga and Lokonga aren't too different in quality. I don't agree with that at all. I think Kamavinga is significantly more. He has a higher ceiling. I think they both have higher ceilings, but Kamavinga is better than Lokonga right now in quality. Maybe in playing type, like they can do similar things, but Kamavinga is better than Lokonga right now. George's opinion says Kamavinga basically does what Conte does now, box-to-box ball winner. I mean, if I had some, I think the way, if you want to see how Kamavinga works, you have to look at some of his compilations, because he has the elite ability to nip the ball off of a player's foot without fouling, and that's an elite skill that only one person has, like Conte. It's very hard to find players like that. So, and he's very much that way. Ekram says Lokonga better than Kamavinga. Dublin Gooner says he would also just be simply a lot of fun to watch. And Rancid says, we need someone who hits the ground running, and I can't see this with Kamavinga. I still prefer Bissouma. So, I mean, that makes total sense too. I kind of feel like we do need somebody that's ready to go. It worries me a little bit that the adaptation time may be a little bit longer than we want. But at the same time, I don't think the club wants to say no to the type of talent that Kamavinga will be, so yeah. Olivier says, love him, but we have a choice between Bissouma, Lokonga, or Kamavinga alone. No choice for us in the shape that we are. I think it's Bissouma or Kamavinga. Lokonga's coming anyway. So the choice is really between Bissouma and Kamavinga. Now, I'm not sure that if you get Kamavinga, if something else would be, maybe we would have limited funds for something else. But from what I've gathered, it's not Bissouma and Lokonga or Kamavinga. It's Bissouma or Kamavinga. Lokonga's coming no matter what. Let's see. Yeah, GK, I know that he does foul. It's players that play as 6'8" that do a lot of defensive work tend to foul more than most players. And you're fouling or not, it's not really about is he fouling more than another player. It's his ability to take the ball off of the opposition is elite level talent. So whether he fouls more than Lakanga doesn't really mean that Lakanga is a better player because he doesn't foul as much. Players that play in that position, no matter who you are, Thomas Partey, Bissouma, they all foul because that position requires you to protect the back line. If you tackle more, you're going to foul more. And so I'm not really sure what your point is, to be honest. If you're trying to prove that Lakanga is better than Kamavinga, I think it's hard to prove that based on anything that we've really seen. So maybe it's just my opinion that from what I've seen, I think Camavinga is further along in their progression. But they're both very talented players. But until we see both of them play for Arsenal in the same environment or something like that, it's hard to really determine it. And I don't think who fouls more is a determining factor on what player is better. But if you play in the 6'8" role and your job is to protect the back line and you tackle more than everybody else, you will naturally get more fouls. That's just how it is. George's opinion says, I feel like some fans have just made their mind up on certain players and aren't willing to listen to different ideas. Yeah, I mean, it's tough, it's tough. Sean says we should be happy on the age and profile of players being scouted, find some joy. People, life is too short. We've spoken about this on Twitter before. I just, don't want to be miserable the entire summer transfer window. So we do these shows to educate and just to have a little bit of fun and just to have a more in-depth conversation about players. If we don't get them, it's not the end of the world. That's not how I live my life. You know what I mean? Yo-Yo says Arsenal need players to help move the ball quicker from end to end. The various links suggest Arteta and Adu are on the money. Exactly. And they do that. Every single player, like you've said, Yo-Yo has those abilities and qualities. Like Kamavinga is press resistant, can move the ball quickly, has a good passing range as well, can dribble out of pressure. Lakanga does that too. Bissouma does that as well. So these are all really good links in my opinion. DG's Football says anybody is an upgrade on Xhaka. Lakanga is a done deal. Is to decide whether it's Bissouma or Kamavinga. Exactly. Abdallah says, Jess, would you rather not have Zakaria instead, who is much more defensively solid than Lakanga, and he has experience in the Champions League? No, because his injuries worry me. I think he has a bummy knee. And to be quite honest, I don't really think he's as good as, I don't think every central defensive midfielders are the same. There's a lot of people that just throw these names like, okay, Kessie, Zakaria, they're all really different and have different qualities. And for me, Zakaria tends to be a little bit on the slower side. I don't think he's technically that great on the ball. And Lakanga has really good upside. Whereas Zakaria, I don't think he has as good of upside. If we're going to buy somebody who is a little bit older and a little bit more experienced, I would say go for Bissouma and instead of Zakaria. But Lakanga for me is such a good move in terms of upside and being able to bring a player in that is 15 to 20 million and sell them for so much more in the future. So I don't really see Zakaria as a backup, which Lakanga is. I don't think he's better than Thomas. I don't think he's better than Bissouma. I wouldn't want to pay 50 million or whatever nonsense that Borussia Mönchengladbach would want for him. And he has a dodgy knee. I don't see Zakaria as being that great. He's just not. Frank Kessié is a great player. We're being linked, but honestly, I feel like it's because he's in contract talks, but I do think he's a good player. Let's see. And the one thing I have to say about Kamavinga is I think, he gives us different options and he has a different type of quality that would move us into a different type of playing style. I think, and we'll talk about this actually, let's just go ahead and do it now because it changes everything about how we would set up. Basically it would make Thomas into the sitter. So here, this is just makeshift. Maybe these players aren't here, but we're mostly just focusing here, is that I don't really see them playing in a pivot here and then this person here, because it just doesn't feel like that's what it is. I think it's very much so Kamavinga would be off of that right-hand side, Thomas would be here, and we would have some other 8 here. Maybe that 8 plays a little bit more like a 10. We don't really know. But Thomas is sitting here. If Bissouma is in the team, then Thomas is the more box-to-box one playing the Camavinga role, and Bissouma is sitting here. So if you bring in Kamavinga, then Thomas is a little bit more, has to sit more in front of the defense, but that's not necessarily a bad thing, because if you play in a midfield 3, you tend to play more fluidly. You don't have to worry, as much, but he would have a little bit more defensive responsibility. And yeah, I mean, it also would depend on who sits here. I mean, if you have really good central defenders that can cover space, Thomas can have a little bit more freedom, but ultimately Camavinga would change how the midfield would play, because he would be more box to box. Thomas would have to protect, and this player would have to probably be some sort of 10, another type of more offensive 8. And I think if you have a midfield like this, you would maybe want to look at somebody like Awa. Awa could play here on this left-hand side. Also, Emile Smith-Rowe could play here, or Madison could play here, because none of them would have that much of a defensive responsibility per se. They would be in a midfield 3, and they'd be playing more like a 10. So let's just say, for argument's sake, just to fill this out, you could play Smith-Rowe here if you wanted to, whatever, So it changes everything, in terms of how we play, because he's not really a pivot player, not a double pivot type player, in my opinion. I think he needs to be in a midfield 3, so that would change things. But again, then you have him pushing up here, you have this 8 pushing up here, you have these players here. I mean, and then you can have this person here, you could have this person sit in here. They become more of like the midfielder there. You have more lanes of attack, you have more attacking presence. I mean, it looks good. It looks good to me, but it just depends on how you want to play football. Let's see. Tawanda says, rather Neves, he's Premier League proven. DG's Football says, don't want Bundesliga players. Kolasinac is a perfect example of why we should stay away from Dennis Zakaria. George's Opinion says, I liked Zakaria when we didn't have Party. Now that we have Party, we have no need for Zakaria. We need a press-resistant CDM to partner Party. Exactly. And both Kamavinga and Bissouma fit that. It's just depending on, if you bring in Kamavinga, it will be a little bit different. Devesh says Kamavinga would cost more than 50 million, though. I mean, he's listed as 60 million on Transfer Market, but what we kind of spoke about at the beginning of the show is once you let a player get into the last year of their contract, you lose a lot of your positioning in terms of what you can actually ask for, because if the player doesn't want to, your option is to sell for whatever the interested party wants to pay, or you let him run his deal down. And a team like Rennes, who's in the French league, who is suffering massively from not being, the TV deal and all that kind of stuff, cannot afford to let Kamavinga walk away for free. So your option really becomes pay whatever the interested parties are willing to pay. And right now, it looks like we're the only ones that are able to pay, unless PSG was able to scrape together something, or maybe Real Madrid. But we wouldn't have to pay more than that unless there was a bidding war. That's why it's really dangerous to allow your players to get down into the last 2 years of their contract, because you lose so much of your power, because your option becomes free or whatever somebody's willing to offer you. Let's see. Abdallah says, nah, Kessie is a baller as well, though. I take him at Chelsea. Yo-Yo says, do we know anything about his personality, temperament? Is he a Saka or Mateo? I mean, I think from the limited knowledge, he has a really good mentality, but I don't know much more past that. he doesn't feel like a Mateo, but then I don't know him. He could get to the Emirates and be a total dick, so who knows, to be honest. Hopefully that's Edu and Arteta's job to figure that shit out. You know what I mean? Yo-Yo says, we were led to believe that Partey joined the club to have a freer role than he had at Atletico. Him sitting deepest in the three may start a new storyline at the club. The reality is that we haven't seen him play in a box-to-box role because he's been holding Granit Xhaka's hand since he's been here. When you play with somebody, which the same thing would happen if you played with Neves, is Thomas has to stand next to you. So that limits his ability to make things happen. You have to have a better right-sided center back, which we've spoken about, somebody who can cover ground, and also a defensive center midfielder who knows what they're doing and can be alone. Then Thomas can do what he needs to do. But I do agree with you that if you brought in a Camavinga type of player, then that would change Thomas's role. But we did see towards the latter end of the season that Arteta tried it a couple times, but we didn't have the right players. Like, if you have Kamavinga there instead of Odegaard, then Thomas has more coverage. So I think it didn't work because we didn't have the right players. Like against Villarreal, when Thomas was basically playing the midfield alone, that was really scary. But if you have a Kamavinga, somebody who has elite defensive qualities, it's not as big of a deal. But I do agree with you, Yo-Yo, that would change things. I really thought that we bring in a Bissouma and allow Thomas to play box to box. I know people are like, well, Thomas is not a great box to box player. It's because we've never seen it, but he has capabilities of being a great box to box player, So I don't know. We'll see. I would take either, to be honest. It's not my money, So if you bring in Kamavinga, we can't say he's a crap player, like, you know what I mean? Or Bissouma, who we know is good, then hey, either one would be awesome, wouldn't it? Olivier says PSG would be a mistake for Kamavinga. Why do you say that? Newman says no swearing unless it applies to Xhaka. My bad. Richard says Kamavinga doesn't score enough for me. It would be a waste of 50 million. We need more goals from midfield. I tend not to agree with this because I just think that what we need to do is be able to create more chances. And if you have somebody, again, who presses up the pitch like a madman and could nick the ball off of the opposition's midfield / defenders, then he's creating chances on his own. And your other four players, your creative midfielder, your two wide men, and your strikers should be able to handle the goals. I think there's different ways to score goals. But one of the a really good way of scoring goals, like if you look at Liverpool's midfield, that was really dominant for the last couple of years. They had three dogs in the midfield and they had two high productive players out wide, and Mane and Salah. And they just pressed people to death to the point where they were creating high quality chances by just nicking the ball off of the defenders and making them make mistakes. That's a good way of creating chances. So I don't necessarily feel like two of our midfielders need to have a high goal potential. I think the 10 / the other 8 would have to. So that's why I like somebody like Madison, who's, shoots a lot and can score goals. But ultimately for me, the midfield needs to be able to take the ball off of the opposition, protect the back line, and be massive ball progressors. And that's what you would get out of, having Camavinga and Thomas, or Thomas and Bissouma. But it just depends on how you see it. Like, some people feel like your midfielders need to chip in with goals. Like we see Man City, their midfielders score a lot of goals, whereas Liverpool's doesn't. It's mostly just Mane and Salah. So it just depends. You could do it either way. Yo-Yo says these relationships, partnerships will have to develop quickly. Arteta will have his work cut out. Yeah, that's another thing, is that bringing in a lot of players can sometimes disrupt things, and the partnerships will not be there. But, that's, again, up to Arteta. So you guys let's go ahead and put some questions into the chat box. If you guys want to, we can stay on for another 10 minutes and do some Q&A. And you can let me know what you guys think about Bissouma / Kamavinga. I think he's a very good player. I'm still leaning more towards Bissouma because I think it's the more safe choice, but I wouldn't say no. Like, you know what I mean? I wouldn't be crying at the end of the day. GK says, Definitely don't rely on Camavinga for creativity. He's a tempo controller. Yo-Yo says, yes, Liverpool are the template, not City. Dominate space, not possession for possession's sake. I tend to agree with you. You guys know I prefer Liverpool's model versus City's model, even though I think Liverpool are going to try to dominate possession just a little bit more. I think they'll bring in some more technical players in their midfield because, again, they've had dogs in the midfield. Not like they're bad players, but I think they'll up the technical quality and get a different way of playing. But ultimately, I like the pressing style, the running style, the ability to win the midfield battle, push up high, create high quality chances from pressing and nicking the ball off of the other team's players, putting them under immense pressure, and doing things that way. So that's how I prefer things. Olivier says, too much competition today at PSG for him to flourish. We have a young, hungry team with Saka, ESR, Pepe. I see no fear in that group. Yeah, there's definitely no fear with our young players. And I think Yo-Yo had kind of mentioned this like yesterday is, you could look at Saka and ESR, and see a good path, to, a good career, and being able to develop at a club like Arsenal. And then you could look at Saliba and Guendouzi and maybe be a little bit, reluctant. So I think my biggest fear with Kamavinga is what is Arteta's ability to create a good environment, a successful environment for young players to thrive, and to be an attractive place, for young players to come. What we will talk about at 10 p.m. UK time with Harry and George is we'll talk about that two-pronged approach to squad building, how we want to be able to do both, to build a team for the now, but also a team for the future. And I think it could start with a player like Camavinga. If you get things right with him, then other young players will want to come. And I know we don't want to be a selling club, but if we're a self-sustaining club, which I think Arsenal will always be under KSE, we need to figure out a way to buy high, high upside or players that could come in and then we can flip them for more. I know people don't want that, but self-sustaining model, you have to be able to sell your players for good fees. It's necessary. Yo-Yo says, wouldn't Lukonga's signing put to bed the Bissouma rumors? No, because we have to think about the amount of midfielders that we're losing. I think when you lose Granit, you're going to not have Guendouzi there, Ceballos, you need to have and this is not like, so nobody thinks I'm saying anything like rude or anything, but we have to have non-African midfielders to stay in our midfield when AFCON comes around. So I think from a standpoint of not having a lot of numbers in midfield, because once you lose Ceballos and Guendouzi and Granit Xhaka, we're talking about one starting position and two backup positions, and then El Neni for AFCON and Thomas for AFCON. So I think if you have Lacazette, Lokanga, and Thomas, and then you have El Neni, and then you add two more midfielders in there, then we're talking about enough midfielders to sustain us through, that period. We need two midfielders and a creative midfielder, in my opinion. Papa Boyle says Arsenal's plan should be to get somewhere between 4th and 6th place on the table. Maddison, White, Bissouma move Arsenal closer to that. Kamavinga, I don't know. Interesting point. Abdallah says Saka and ESR are ballers. Pepe for me is very much a purple patch baller like Pulisic. I think Pepe needs to improve his decision making on a consistent basis, and that way he'll properly ball out. Yeah, I think ESR and Saka are different than Pepe. Pepe definitely needs to stay consistent. I just think that if we want to get anything out of Pepe, he kind of needs to be a big part of next season. And I'm not sure that he starts over Saka in Arteta's mind. And because Arteta likes to play inverted, wingers or inverted forwards, I don't think he starts on the left-hand side either. So we'll see how things kind of shake out. But I don't see Pepe moving. I don't see him starting. Let's see. Dublin Gooner says, I don't mind being the big step before the huge step. Let's be England's Dortmund. I think there's a way to do it without getting completely sucked into that Dortmund model or the Leicester model where you're always kind of a little bit short. But we have to be smart, and there's nothing wrong with it. I know we're a little bit like, oh, we don't want to be a selling club, but you can be well run and win things and be up at the top of the table and still sell some of your players. There's nothing wrong with that. Bjorn says, Kamavinga is a fantastic talent. I've paid much attention to him for 2 seasons now and have wanted him to United for 18 months. DG's Football says we should get Bissouma because he is not going to AFCON. So one thing that I had been trying to look at, because people were putting in the chat box, is that Bissouma has not played for Mali since 2018, and they have had obviously the African Cup of Nations qualifiers and all that since then. So maybe he's not going to AFCON. Maybe he's not really a part of the Mali national team. If that's true, yeah, we should be signing him up. Yeah, for sure. It doesn't feel like he's going, but regardless, if it's Lakanga or Bissouma for neither of them are going to AFCON. We need 2 midfielders. You can't lose, Ceballos and Guendouzi and Xhaka and only bring in 1. You know what I mean? You still have to bring in 2. Sean says, we need a midfield that can go toe-to-toe with the best. I'm happy with what I'm seeing, to be honest. We're on the same page there, Sean. Abdallah says, question, do you prefer Pires or Bergkamp? Pires, 100%. He was, I love Bergkamp. Don't get me wrong. I loved everybody on that freaking team. I love the water boy on that team, on the Invincibles. But there's something about Pires because he wasn't really athletic, but the things that he was able to accomplish, not being athletic, he was so skillful. He was always at the right place at the right time. I loved that guy. I love that guy so much. I love Bergkamp as well, but if I had to say which one I loved Robert Pires. I thought he was so good. Bergkamp was good too, though. Make sure you guys hit the like button. There's 60 of you guys watching right now, which is awesome. Make sure you like the video. And yeah, set your timers too to come back at 10 p.m. UK time, as we'll be back talking about squad building and all that kind of stuff. And then the watch along for the Copa America game a little bit later as well. J October says, Bissouma is the midfielder for me because he makes us better than the teams are around us now. Yeah. So you guys, it seems like more people want Bissouma, which is awesome. I'm a part of Bissouma Propaganda FC. We love him. So hey, why not? I think if you have, honestly, my dream midfield at the end of this window would be Bissouma, Thomas, and Maddison. I think that midfield makes a lot of sense. It's an improved midfield. It can go toe-to-toe with anybody. It's what I would prefer. But if we got Camavinga, I wouldn't cry, but I think that's the midfield that takes you forward right away. As you guys have already said, no adaptation needed. Premier League proven players at a good age, both Maddison and Bissouma being at 24 years old. I think Bissouma sitting and Thomas Partey going is the perfect balance. So that's what I would like to see. Dublin Gooner says either upgrades on what we've got. Yo-Yo says, Pepe showed last season that he can deliver when given the grace to play consistently, irrespective of performance. Arteta will be foolish not to trust him now. I just don't know if he starts. I don't know if he starts because you really see, once everybody comes back, obviously the Euros and all that kind of stuff is subsided. Do you really see Arteta picking Pepe over Saka? I don't see it. And the person on that left-hand side is going to be somebody who's right-footed, so hey, let's see what happens. Tawanda says, the Invincibles are the second double winning team. I would say the Invincibles because that's the team that I saw, so I would say the Invincibles for me. Both teams were obviously amazing. AK Gunner says, all reliable reports say Bissouma is not the priority target, which frustrates me. It tells me that Arteta wants Xhaka profile replacement. I mean, it doesn't. It could potentially tell you that we're going after Camavinga. If we wanted Neves, what would stop us from going to get him now? Like, you know what I mean? I know that he's at the Euros, but I mean, those links have been there for a long time. And actually, we have to wait a little bit too, I think, because we have to see once Xhaka is like gone, we'll see what happens. But I really think it has something to do with this. I think if we have a chance to get Camavinga, we'll try it. And if that doesn't happen, we'll go after Bissouma. Neves just doesn't really make a lot of sense, but hey, if we wanted Neves and we were interested, why haven't we put in a bid yet? You know, if it's either Bissouma or Neves, what's stopping us from putting in a bid? It hasn't stopped us from trying to go after Ben White, who's also at the Euros. Both of them are sitting on the bench. They're, you know, eating pine right now. So I'm not sure that it really tells me that he wants a Xhaka replacement. It feels like it's, you know, it might have something to do with this because this needs to be taken care of by June 28th. I think that's the day that they said if he doesn't like resign by then they'll start looking at offers, and it's by like June 30th they said that he has to start, you know, he has to resign, and it's June 21st. You know, so it feels like we're waiting on this. That's what it feels like. Let's see. GK says, got me thinking of Stoke. Yo-Yo says, best non-US women's side you've seen. The old Germany sides with Berger Prince and all of them was epic. The Brazil sides with Formiga and Kacha and Marta, obviously amazing. China used to be that thing back in the day, back in the like early or late 90s, early 2000s. Japan was really good at one point. But I would say like if we have to say like recent times, France, like for sure. And Spain is creeping up there as well. If they could figure out a way to score goals, they'd be dangerous. Olivier says, I agree with Jess. I think that top four with that midfield. I think so too. I think we're dangerously close. Bjorn says, I very much doubt that Madison will want to go to Arsenal. I mean, that's what rival fans say, like, you know, because they just are like, well, you're eighth, so why would anybody want to come to you? But as we've kind of already spoke about, you know, if Arsenal didn't think there was a chance of getting him, we wouldn't be reliably linked to him at all. There's no point in even putting together packages or anything like that for a player that says they would never come to Arsenal. The reality is that he's not a number one choice for Brendan Rodgers this season. Even though he had been injured, he wasn't injured the entire time. And even when he was not injured, he was not always in the starting lineup. For him to get back into the English national team, he needs to be starting for his club team in the position in which he plays because it's very competitive. Leicester is never going to really compete if they stick with their model. I think Arsenal is a bigger club. We can offer him better wages. And if we have a competitive plan of how we're going to get back into the top four, I don't see why he wouldn't want to come. So there's a lot of different reasons. You know, the fact that Leicester are going to start playing with a 5 through the middle or a 4 through the middle in a 3-4-3 or a 3-5-2. That doesn't really leave a place for a 10. So there's a lot of different reasons that I gave you right there why Madison would probably want to come to Arsenal. And again, it's been reported that he would be open to the idea. You know, again, you don't put in bids, you don't set up packages, you don't talk to anybody unless you know that you have a chance of getting the player. But I understand why Rebel fans would think that because it's your eighth, you know, your eighth. I mean, it's so much more complex than your eighth, to be honest. Yo-Yo says Arteta has to use Abba and Pepe as split forwards like a Pedro Villa did at Barcelona or Mane Salah at LVP. I mean, I don't know. I don't know what's going to go on with that. I think Abba off the left, or if you mean like playing a two-striker system or something like that, I don't know. I don't know what's going to go on with that, to be honest. I don't know where Pepe and Aubameyang fit in with all of this, because I still think if we bring in a striker, like you already said, that would push Aubameyang out of the central forward position. But him off of the left is just so not it. It's not it, so we'll see. Lone Star says Arsenal is a long-term project. All we offer is silly wages. Let's see. Abdallah says a boomerang. He's easily one of the best pure finishers in the Prem. Only Kane and Vardy are clear. Rancid asks, would you sell Aubameyang for 40 million? Yes, I would. AK Gunner says, would you be happy with Van Arnholt as a left back? David Ornstein says we are looking for a young left back prospect to compete with Tierney. I think this is going to be the hardest position to fill. Like, who wants to sit behind Tierney? And I know that. I know that Tierney gets injured, but the reality is if he doesn't, you're never going to play. Like, you know what I mean? You have no chance of playing whatsoever. So a young left back who's looking at Tierney like, am I going to get any playing time? You look at somebody like Tsimikas, who left Olympiacos to go to Liverpool, never plays because Andy Robertson played every single game last season, I think. So even if he, like, let's say that Tierney was unable to play for 10 of the games next season, you get 10 starts maybe. Is that enough for somebody who's in a good age that probably wants to play all the games? So I think it's really difficult to get a young player to sign up to be a backup, even though we know Tierney can be injured. But so I think we would be looking at somebody maybe that would just be like, okay, I'm good to be a backup. Van Arnholt doesn't kill me. It's not about Van Arnholt. It's about Van Arnholt, the deal. What does the deal look like? How many years? What are the wages looking like? We don't want another Cedric where we have 4 years stuck with him. Maybe 2 years or something like that with him. And in the meantime, we identify somebody to bring into our academy that when Van Arnholt leaves and Tierney's 26, 27, they'll be okay with coming in and we have more games, meaning that we're in Europe. But right now, it looks like that's what we would be doing because it's very difficult to convince somebody to sign up to be a backup that's so young that could probably go somewhere else and start. You know what I mean? Dublin Gunner said, I play backup for Tierney. I'd be beyond terrible, but I do it. I do it for free. I would do it for free. I would go. I would sit. I'd be fine. J October says, Pepe has to start with Saka on the wings. Saka, the creative winger, and Pepe, the goal-scoring winger. I mean, it makes sense if one of them was right-footed. I think it depends on who comes in, but, if Emile Smith-Rowe signs this new deal, do you think that Arteta would sit him? I'm not sure. Even if we bring in a 10, like even what we did with Odegaard, for the most part, Emile Smith-Rowe played off of the left. You have Martinelli as well. And Arteta likes inverted wingers. I think it makes the most sense to play, as you've said, Pepe and Saka. Like, that's what I would like to see. Pepe and Saka with probably a different striker if Aubameyang can't do it, and James Maddison type player through the middle. But I'm not sure. I'm not sure what's going to happen, you guys. I really don't. But I wish Pepe was right-footed so he could, because we do need more goal scorers. Yo-Yo says the new forward should be used like Messi, Firmino, in an aforementioned systems, decoy runs to create space for the wider players to get in behind. So like a false nine-ish type of player. So who is that? Because we don't really have that type of player. So, what player is that? It's so difficult because players can play false nine, but not well. But that's a really good point. Can Andre Silva do that? What do you think? George's opinion says, troubles me how bereft we are at left back in our academy. Lopez isn't ready. I don't think he's ready either, George. I just think that when you've ran the club so poorly for so many years, you end up having to take L's like this that you shouldn't have to, because you should already have somebody coming up in that academy ready to go, but we don't. So we have to take this L. I think we will bring in like a Van Arnholt. I'd prefer him over Bertrand, to be honest. But at the same time, hopefully the club would be able to recognize that there's a big gap there. And our backups should be players from our academy. I don't think we should be buying backups at this point. Have them come through your academy, and then they serve two purposes. They can be backups and fill gaps in the squad, but also increase their value as they play for the first team. But who am I? Abdallah says, Jessica, do you think R9 was the best finisher football's ever seen? It's a really tough question. I mean, R9 is epic. R9 is inevitable. It's so difficult to say, but I think from the small sample size, not small sample size, but he played a lot less than players that we know of now. So yeah, I would say that he's probably one of the best. I need to see the numbers. Where are the statistics? I need statistics, you know what I mean? AK Gunner says, I think Pepe can explode for us next season. I do too if he plays. He has to play. I hope he does. Abdallah says, Messi the GOAT after Dino. One of the best, greatest finishers, passers, dribblers to ever play the game. Passes better than your best midfielder and better finisher than your striker. Messi is clear. Yeah, Messi has great passing numbers as well. He's very well-rounded for a player that, people almost really only think about as like scoring goals, but he's really good with his passing as well. He's always high up there for assists, so Messi, great finisher. It's just so hard because, back then stats weren't really that important, but you just kind of used your eye. I know, Abdallah, you're really big on eye tests. Now, if you were to ask me who's the best finisher right now, I'd go straight to the stats and try to figure that out. But Messi, definitely. R9 was amazing. I mean, high numbers as well. Like, even if you look at Henry, like, he got a lot of chances because we created a lot of chances, but he was also a really good finisher and did some mad things that he shouldn't have been able to do. So I don't know. It's difficult to say. But Messi, yeah, for sure. Like, he's so well-rounded and people don't really talk about it. George's opinion says, totally agree. Now we are sending young players on loan. Don't know why that wasn't done before, more often under Wenger. The academy was dead. Yeah, Lewandowski, Messi. Yeah. Yo-Yo says, before my time, but the Bastututa, or however you spell his name, is always talked about for his finishing. I do rate Shevchenko and Eto'o. Then we start getting into, more players that were great finishers. I don't know. It's like so hard to say the greatest ever. Like, you know what I mean? So I don't even want to get into that debate, to be honest. Yeah, I get what you're saying. It depends on how many chances you get, and then it's like, how many chances does it take you to score a goal? I get what you're saying. It's just, and do you mean like greatest finisher in terms of the type of finishes and the catalog of finishes, or, purely based on numbers, like how many chances did they need to score as many goals as they scored? Greatest finisher can mean two different things, to me. It could be about the types of finishes and the catalog of finishes, as well. So Arsenal, or Tawanda says, Arsenal should follow the Moneyball system. We don't have Wenger or Kajigao to find the best players anymore. Yeah. All right, you guys, that's going to be it for now because we'll be back a little bit later. Again, George and Harry will join me for, oh no, are you guys gone? What happened? Okay, my screen went away. But George and Harry will be here to talk about, Arsenal's big spending summer. We're not saying like, oh, we're going to spend all this money, but we just kind of want to talk about how Arsenal it looks like they're going for a two-pronged approach to address our present and our future. So we'll kind of talk about that, how the money should be spent, why Arsenal fans have such a divided opinion on how the money should be spent, why we're such accountants when it comes down to the transfer window. And yeah, we'll talk about all those things. And of course, you guys will be able to ask them questions. I know you guys love George. I know you guys love Harry as well. So it should be a fun show. 10 p.m. UK time. And then I'll also be doing a watch along for the Copa America games coming on later. So like the video, subscribe to the channel. Let me know in the comment section, after, the video is done, what you guys think about Kamavinga and all those types of things. And I'll talk to you guys soon. Bye, guys.